Hello, welcome to Higher Living with Chad, and we're kicking on with these episodes. And we're looking today at psychedelics, but the angle we're going for is who should have caution? Who should have caution around taking psychedelics or experimenting with psychedelics? And what are the ways that you can mitigate potentially some of those risks? Yes, maybe not what you want to hear straight up in terms of risk and caution and safety factors. But if you're looking at getting information to support your own journey and you want to understand all the different compounds that you can use, how high those doses could get to, and the crazy experiences that you can have, and the spiritual experiences, the mystical experiences, the breakthroughs, there's plenty of information available, and we will be diving into that. But I think what's important is to kind of just to stop for a moment, to stop in this big momentum that is occurring and kind of bring it back to the question that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, or not enough people are talking about, and it is, what are the parameters that we should be looking at to ensure that there is safe use of psychedelics? Now, the reason why we're talking about this is we put up a post this week of the musician, artist, songwriter by the name of Post Malone. He did a recent interview with Zane Lowe from Apple Music. You can see we're displaying it right here. And one of the things that he says is that there was some memory loss, short-term memory loss that was associated with his use of psilocybin. Now, there's a lot that we kind of need to drill into from that to understand what was the use that he was doing and at what doses. But I think what we can see from the information that we've got, it was excessive, high use that then potentially led to the challenges that he's seeing. And then some of you online are also commenting, which is rightfully so. Post Malone has a known history of use of other substances and also alcohol use. And so then it's the combination of that to then get us to the picture of where we are today, of saying, well, you know, what were the real reasons why, what were the factors that may have contributed to Post Malone stating that there were some deficits that resulted from the way that he consumed mushrooms, right? So whether or not we want to unpack that in too much detail, I think it's a very important place to start this conversation from. And the reason is this. So I don't know if you're hearing about this, but increasingly we've got larger and larger portions of the population across the world that are getting really interested in psychedelics, particularly mushrooms, and then leading to other areas as well. We know that there's the psychonauts out there that are trying to take and consuming everything that is available, all the different compounds, and almost as Tim Ferriss talks about. And if you don't know Tim Ferriss, there are some really, really, really important podcasts for you to listen to, which we will show here. This one is around ketamine, and then we're going to be able to show some from some of the other interviews that he's done. And we'll just put some here, and then we'll put some here. And that would be my recommendation for you, would be listen to the way that this man goes about some of his interviews with some of the best minds that are available to give you information to ensure that you're making the most informed decisions around how you, a loved one, or someone you know is going to potentially start looking at integrating these medicines into your life. And the reason we're in this situation is because we know that a lot of people are suffering. You may be suffering at the moment. And in some ways, if we want to adopt a philosophical approach to this, life is suffering. Therefore, all of us are going to be suffering at some point. And I've mentioned this on a previous podcast, but Les Brown, a famous motivational speaker, I think one of the best speakers that I've ever heard, and has touched me in many ways. And during my days when I was a terminal cancer patient, directly having him talk to me through YouTube was probably one of the major differences that gave me hope, gave me belief, and was able to support me to get to the situation where I am today. And one of the things that he says is that you're either coming out of a crisis or you're about to go into one. And with that, gives us an understanding about the last few years that have occurred for all of us on a grand scale. Now we've got a number of different factors that seem to be coming for us, that the media want to portray, and it's very evident around Is there going to be a war, a massive World War III? What's happening in terms of rising interest rates? What's going on in terms of the quality of living? What's happening in terms of the structure of family? There's a whole range of different changes that we're currently living through, which results in people kind of feeling that they're out of place and they're disconnected. And that disconnection, that lack of meaning, we're much, to look at the trends, we're unhealthy as a mass at the moment as we are. So with that, of course, there's going to be increased depression, increased substance misuse, increased anxiety, and a whole range of other areas as well. And we've got all this money that gets pumped into mental health systems around the world, yet we're still continuing to see trends which are rising rates of mental illness in the community. And it's very common if we're looking at somewhere like Australia. I'm approaching 40. We went through a conversation the other day. Unfortunately, someone there's been a publicized suicide that I'm not going to go into out of respect for family, but it kind of brings up, I know probably at least 15 people that have committed suicide during the years that I've been alive and people that I've known. And, in certain countries, we see those rates to be extremely high. And so with all respect, if you know someone, my heart goes out to you. And if you're listening to this and you have got solution, and if you are desperate, it increases the likelihood of you going, I just want a solution, and why not? And so if you're already in a situation, or you know someone that isn't in the best situation and they are suffering, and you're hearing a lot of this momentum around psychedelics and how it can be this magic bullet and the magic cure for individuals to help them get through their different challenges and give them meaning, etc., there are documented studies that demonstrates that can be the case. But it's not always the case that it's going to be a magic cure. There's a lot of work for you to do, and there's a lot of preparation that goes alongside it. And there's ways that you can optimize or stack the deck to ensure that you can get the most benefits out of whatever pathway you choose to go down. And that doesn't always necessarily just following the crowd. And following the crowd at this time could be, hey, you've just got to go do psychedelics and have this amazing experience. And even if you're in a very challenging situation, then the message that you may get is there's no such thing as a bad trip. It's only a challenging trip. Yeah, it's only a challenging experience. Now, that can be true, but that also comes with an expectation that you are going to make meaning out of it. So say if you do have a experience which is challenging, causes some thoughts to come up, which can be quite intrusive, can be quite dark, yeah, then you need to integrate that back into your life, but you remember all that. Right. And so then you're in a situation where you're going to transition back, but you've got all this noise that may be amplified. So you're in a situation where you thought, I don't know what else to do. I've exhausted other options. I'm now going into this situation to try a psychedelic because I need to change and I'm desperate to change. But what's going on now? I've got all these crazy thoughts. And in some ways, as I'm speaking, people would be like, well, there you go. That's the spot. Those crazy thoughts that are coming up, you just got to deal with that, and right there's the work for you to do. I get some of that, but it's also a very challenging and difficult experience for many, and this could be talking to you right now, to then deal with that period of time where you got to reintegrate it. Hence why, if that is a situation that you're experiencing, go seek professional support. There's a really big need to be able to have an unbiased person or professional to be able to support you to go through some of the things that could be coming up for you. Yeah. So with that, if you don't make meaning, what do you do? Yeah. And where do you go? Because you can then be in a situation where things get amplified and you're now looking for more solutions, and you may not have the funds to go see the professional. You may already be let down and you just may be at your wit's end and you don't know what is going to happen. So let's reverse engineer that. Let's then take a number of steps back to go, well, how do I go about my journey, right? How do I go about my circumstances now? Maybe you're new to it. Maybe you're new to this area and you have started hearing a little bit about psychedelics and thinking maybe this could be for you. Maybe you've had a bad experience in the past and you're thinking, well, how do I dip my toes back in again? Or maybe this isn't something that you're going to come across now, but you start hearing a family or a family or a friend who potentially has some of these signals or just points of consideration that you are now informed with, that you can support them in your journey. And just to be clear, I'm not here to say don't do it. I'm not here. I know of the benefits of this, and I see that this is going to be transformative in terms of mental health treatment in our communities around the world. But with that, I believe there's a need to go, let's slow down, let's ensure the right information goes out, and let's ensure that everyone's making informed decisions and aren't just being consumed by people and organizations that have an agenda to push, which can often compromise potentially the 10% around the 10%, and that may be inflated. But I've got some information recently out of a facility that is currently doing psychedelic retreats. And what we're seeing is around 10% of individuals having these experiences that aren't the mystical experiences that we all want, right? And so with that in mind, if it's going to be 1 in 10, well, how do you go about that to mitigate that risk of you being that 1 out of 10 and going about it in a more planned way and having the right information? I'm going to show Tim Ferriss again, because he's been instrumental in terms of getting psychedelics to where they are now. And his message isn't the one to go out and go try everything you can, go to Arizona and have a look at some of, and go and take 5-MeO DMT from the toads, then go down to Peru and have your ayahuasca, then go have your peyote, then go have, that's not the message, right? If you want to go for it. And I'd love to have that conversation. And I'm always here to learn and experience. But the message that I'm going to give to you today is, how do you mitigate risk? And so there are known risks, right? So if you do fall into one of these categories, well, what decision making are you going to do to inform how you go about your macro or micro dose to ensure that you do get these beneficial experience that we've seen that are validated by the gold standard, which is randomized clinical trials. So we do know that there's evidence, but we also know that that comes with risk, and it comes with mild to moderate adverse events for certain populations. And those adverse events are more likely to occur for individuals that have a number of these factors that I'm going to go into today. So first up, we mentioned before about Post Malone. So as started this podcast, while he was taking daily and excessive use of psychedelics, psilocybin, he was also consuming a lot of other things to go along with it as well. So if you're in a situation at the moment where you are using potentially a lot of other illicit substances, or you do have very high use of high potency THC, and then you're going to combine all this into one experience, have some caution. Yeah. Is it better to have a washout period for a period of time to get yourself into the cleanest potential state in terms of physical health, psychological health, to get you in a position where you can optimize that experience, right? So if you're using a lot of things at the moment, consider having a period of time where you get a break. And if you have a look at what goes on in terms of a ayahuasca ceremony, say in Peru, you've got a period of time of cleansing, and that is what you eat, etc., for some of the purging that is going to occur. But it is preparing you to get to a situation where then you're ready for the medicine. So first up, if you're using a lot of things, how do you go about this in a way to reduce some of that for a period of time to then be able to optimize how this benefit can come? Because there's going to be interactions between some of the points that I mentioned just before. So the other one, straight up, have you had psychosis before? Or have you had a psychotic episode, potentially again as a result of utilizing party drugs or recreational substances in the past? Has that occurred for you? Have you had extreme paranoia in the past? And this isn't to say that if you've had those things to then go, that's not going to be for me. But if it is, how do you be mindful that those factors or those events that have occurred in the past may bring out a likelihood that you could be more at risk than someone else or one of your friends that you consume the same amount of things, but they've had a wonderful experience and having these mystical experiences that you probably you may be envious and you may desire that, but that may not be possible. And the more you push, the more likelihood it could result in different challenges coming up for you, which aren't necessarily then seen to be such a wonderful experience and that you make meaning of. It could be that this causes intrusive thoughts and paranoia and unsettling in terms of your overall mental health for a period of time. So if you have had that in the past, potentially be mindful of it. The other one is, have you had long-term use or are you using psychiatric medicines at the moment? And if you are, don't listen to me on a podcast. This isn't medical advice. Talk to your professionals about that. And increasingly, there's, we're in a very interesting time because we're at the kind of the infancy still of how these medicines are going to be reintegrated back into society. So there are certain people that you can listen to, and there's professionals increasingly that are being trained to be able to help you go about that. And if you don't have the means to do that, again, what sort of information can you obtain online through different podcasts that are reputable, that are going to give you the information that's going to be helpful to work out what is dosing going to look like for you. Obviously, there's risk factors for individuals that are pregnant or breastfeeding at the moment. So obviously be mindful of that, like you would be anyway for any type of medicine that you would be considering. And finally, one of the other factors that I think is pivotal to talk about is, are you obese? Do you have different heart conditions, or do you have high blood pressure? Because what is known is that different experiences at different dosing is going to have an impact potentially on your heart rate and your blood pressure. And so with that, are you then in a position where, again, you can increase the risk of you having an adverse event, which turns out to be more significant than the situation and your baseline that you started, right? So in terms of understanding some of those risks, are you using a lot of things at the moment? Is it going to increase the capacity for your space in your mind and the noise to be unsettling? Yeah. Is there a history of psychosis, or have you had a psychotic episode in the past that you need to be mindful of? Long-term use of psychiatric medicines or existing psychiatric medicines, pregnant or breastfeeding, and then also factors around your heart health. Now, if all those are in place, there's ways that you can mitigate it. Get the right information first and foremost. Set the intention around what the journey is going to be and how you dip your toes in to start saying, well, if I start with that microdose, right? And if you aren't in a situation where you can seek professional support, or you're in a jurisdiction where it needs to be pushed underground, as it is in most countries at this time, and a lot of people are self-experimenting, what does it mean to dip your toes in the water and learn from the experiences? There's a little app called OnTracka, obviously, which can help you to understand how these medicines affect you, and really where you were before you were taking it, what it was like in terms of the experience. So down on your app, there's a little plus sign. If you're using a microdose, tap that thing, enter what you're taking, and score yourself. How am I feeling now? What is my depression like? What is my anxiety like? What is my creativity like? What is my joy? Whatever is relevant for you, document it and score it, start the timer, and at some point, it'll probably be around an hour to 90 minutes, you may start noticing something and just check in and score. Now, that microdose may be much more than a microdose, and you may start to see things change, right? Your concept of reality may start to have different dimensions to it and different layers, but also that can also be challenging from the different inputs that may be coming in, particularly inputs that aren't one in where you're in nature, but a lot of humans coming into your space. And if you start noticing the intrusive thoughts, or you start noticing paranoia, you get more anxious, maybe that setting isn't right for you. Yeah, the physical setting. Maybe your mindset wasn't right. Maybe you need the professional support around you, or that could be an indicator to say, oh, well, I started with this low dose and I had these experiences. While I desire to have these bigger doses, is that for me? What is the right decision for me to make? And how do I get the right support, place myself in a position where I'm informed to then be able to make the right decisions which are best for me? Yeah. So just wanted to ensure that this was as concise as possible. And again, there's a load of information out there that's going to tell you all the different compounds you can do, how big these doses you can be, the doses that you can take, and the interactions between different psychedelics and different compounds and what you're going to do. That's all out there online. My responsibility is, and what I see, is to ensure that someone is still out there talking about caution and talking about what steps you can take so that you can optimize the experience and move ahead. So this is a wonderful, life-changing and transformative experience that we hear about. Yeah, that's it for today. I'm wearing that hat of safety, but I feel it's essential to be able to provide this message to you or to someone that you know. My name is Chad Walkerton, and I'm the founder at OnTracka, which you can hear about by going below. OnTracka is there to support you in these times to be able to understand how the different medicines affect you and to give you that live feedback to say, wow, before I started taking it, this was my life and this is where I was. And I can see that I was more irritable. I can see that there was more anger. I could see that I was more depressed. And now what we're seeing afterwards is that I am feeling better. There is no depression at all. My irritability is down. My anger's down. I'm feeling more creative. I've got more focus. I've got more productivity. That is a result. That is a very likely result that you can have from these experiences. Final word. A German neuroscientist called Vincent from Peru was one of my great teachers in this. There is no rush. Yeah, there's no rush. And that's something that we need to be mindful of, because in today's culture and where I'm from, it's all about how much you can do. That's how I kind of grew up in some ways. But it's not about that. How do these medicines come in, and how do you go on your path at your pace? How do you have the courage to maybe go off the grain and say, well, I'm not sure if that is for me, and I'm going to go about it more slowly, or you know what, this isn't for me at all. And at times you're going to need courage to be able to do that. And I hope, and my intentions are that information like this can support your journey. Because if it can support your journey, it can have a lasting impact on others around you. And if you have experienced significant paranoia or a psychotic experience in the past, and you feel very isolated, very lonely, and there's a lot of mistrust for everyone that's near you, that's not a good experience at all. And if this can help you or help someone that's close to you to not have one of those experiences, well, that is my job done. As to note, this isn't medical advice. Please consult a healthcare professional or your doctor about any matters that you're looking at in regards to your health, particularly when considering introducing psychedelic medicines into your life. This is Chad Walkerton. This is Higher Living. Thank you very much.